Welcome to Heads vs. Feds, where the ultimate odd couple give their take on the day's news stories. Usually Bob and I are talking about drug war news stories, but today we got a couple of tragedies in the news, Bob.
Yeah, as most people who know me know, I come from a law enforcement background, 25 years as a DEA agent. My heart is with cops in the United States. But I think last night we had a true tragedy in the United States where a gentleman named Troy Davis was executed. The very least you can say about it is we executed a person for whom almost anybody would say there was a reasonable doubt about his guilt. Most people, or many people, would say he was probably innocent. I wasn't there, I don't know. The evidence certainly points to the fact he didn't do it. But I know of no sane person that can argue and say his guilt went beyond a reasonable doubt. They had 9 witnesses, 7 recanted testimony. Please remember that people always think that eyewitnesses testifying in criminal cases are the gold standard. They are not. People lose memory, change their mind. Of the 9, 7 are recanted. The bullet they found was tied to another crime. It turns out that was faulty ballistics. And finally, the other man who was there when the police officer was shot actually confessed to the crime. Now, if that doesn't equal a reasonable suspicion, I don't know what does. For many years, I was pro-death penalty. And then I became to the point where it should only be for the worst crimes that there is no doubt the person is guilty, and particularly heinous crimes. I think this pushes me over the edge and just makes me, I don't know how we can continue with the death penalty in this country when we put this man to death and the system did not react. I do think it is a tragedy, Steve.
Well, I'm actually against the death penalty. I don't think it should be ever used unless I've actually am pro-suicide in medical cases or in cases where somebody's going to be in jail for the rest of their life. I think they should have the option of just opting out.
Right.
But as far as doing violence to people, I'm against it in all forms. And it was interesting to note that the victim's family is just so convinced this is the guilty guy. They were making comments like, the guy is, said he's innocent so many times, now he even believes it.
Right.
Well, I think it's the reverse is the case, that the family has been told this is the guy so many times that now they believe it's the guy.
And let us be clear, the victim was a hero. He was an off-duty police officer who tried to save a homeless man from being beaten. He went way beyond the call of duty. He was a hero. I feel terrible for his family. To lose a son who was a law enforcement officer like that is terrible, but that does not mean that we should have executed this man.
And yes, it is a great tragedy. And the other tragedy that occurred the same day was a 14-year-old boy named Jamie Rodemeyer committed suicide after being cyber-bullied because of his gay orientation. And this happened exactly 1 year after a Rutgers student, Tyler Clemente, who did the same thing. And most people think when they talk about bullying, they think about being beaten up after class or something like that. That's not what's going on. It's now that everything happens in social networking sites, people can be preyed online and harassed and intimidated just through online comments. And it's so sad to see. I mean, when kids are in middle school, this is when their sexual orientation begins to emerge. This is when, there's a lot of changes taking place in them. And I'm a big believer in free speech, but there has to be some kind of protection that we can give to kids to protect them from cyberbullying, especially at the age of middle school. I mean, can charges be filed against the people that were doing this? And what can we make laws that will protect these middle school children?
Of course, the problem is, and the answer is, I obviously think it's a tragedy, and hopefully we could design some laws that pass constitutional muster of free speech. The problem will come when we try to design that line of free speech versus cyberbullying. Where do we design the line? It's a very, very tough line. The courts haven't figured it out yet. I don't certainly know in this case if somebody will be charged. But the case reminds me of one other thing, and that was a lesson you taught me a number of years ago. As you know, when we do our debates, we get a lot of counterculture kids, kids with dreadlocks, kids that you would look at and say, oh, and think you can preconceive who that young man or young woman is. And one of the things I've learned working with you is you never judge a book by its cover. People are so different, and they each should be treated as individuals, good or bad, smart or dumb, etc., but they're individuals. And that's a lesson I learned from us working together over the years. And I think it's beyond terrible when somebody picks on a kid because of his or her sexual orientation or what they look like or how they dress, etc.
Yes, we'd like to see more tolerance and less bigotry in America.